welcome. It's Katie from the Center for Wildlife. We're here with our morning meeting. Today we're going to be meeting some of our big brown bat ambassadors that we have here at the center. And please let us know if you are here. Leave your name in the comments down below and any questions that you have about our ambassadors. We'll be getting them out and getting a pretty good close-up look at them because we're able to do that with these guys. And then we also have some special announcements for the end. So please stay tuned and we will we'll give you guys some updates on some of our fun activities and things that have been going on. So without further ado, we can get out one of our bat ambassadors. This is where our big brown bat ambassadors live. Both of our ambassadors are not flighted, so they are not able to fly, and that is why it might look like their enclosure is pretty small, but that's for their safety. If they were really to be in a large enclosure that they could run around in, they might fall, they might have a hard time getting around, so this is where they live. Bats love to snuggle and cuddle each other, so we usually find Brownie and Betty in one spot in the enclosure, huddled up next to each other. They love the warm fleeces to cuddle in. That makes them feel nice and secure and safe. And then bats are also usually found sleeping, hanging upside down. So when we look for Brownie and Betty, especially when I go to a school, I love to ask the kids, where do you think that they're going to be? Are they going to be hiding behind this tree here? Are they going to be under this log over here? Where would you think that a bat would be? And most kids know that bats hang upside down from their back feet on the roof, on the tops of caves or in houses or attics. And so when we look for our bats in our enclosure, we do look in the top rather than in the bottom because that's where they're probably going to be. Hello to everyone that's joining us. Please remember to leave your name so that we can say hello.
Andrew just logged on and is watching.
He's watching from like that room.
Yeah.
It's been really fun being able to keep in touch with the Center for Wildlife community, our volunteers and our family, our larger family doing this because we do miss all of our volunteers that are not able to be with us at the center. So I think I see some movement from over in this corner, so I'm going to take a peek and see where they are. Oh, no, they're not there. Maybe they moved over to the side here. Where did they go? Oh, there's one! So if you guys can see, I know the lighting's not the best. Brownie and Betty are right there. Hello! We give them this grippy stuff to climb on so that they can get around. That's Brownie. Hi, Brownie. And then Betty just moved along. So we'll get out Brownie because she seems to be a little bit quieter today. Hi! So we're just very gentle with them. They are very delicate.
Oh, Caitlyn just logged on. Hi,
Hi,
Caitlyn.
Speaking of someone we miss.
Yeah.
Hi. So this is Betty. Hi, Betty. I know. This is Betty. She is our younger big brown bat ambassador. She's been with us for the last 5 years or so, 4 or 5 years. Good girl. She did come to us as an adult, so we are actually unsure of her exact age, but she has been with us for a while now. Betty, you can see, has this wing that sticks out. Bats are amazing. Their wings are actually made up of their hands, so all of these tiny little bones that you see in her wing are actually her finger bones, which I think is just insane. Like, look at those tiny, thin, fragile little bones. So they obviously are very delicate and can get injured quite easily if they get caught by anything. Betty here was caught by a cat. This is why we always recommend, especially this time of year, keeping cats indoors, keeping dogs on leashes, making sure that our domestic animals are not hurting our wild animals. Hi, where you going? We're getting all excited. It's okay. We're going to wrap her in a little burrito. Sometimes they do like to be wrapped up. That makes them feel a little bit more secure and safe. So we'll wrap her in a little burrito, a bat burrito as we call them here, and show you her adorable little face. Hi. because I think it's my bedtime. You can see they have really, really tiny little eyes and large satellite dish ears. And so this can tell us something about how they get around. Our bats are not necessarily blind. You may have heard this phrase, blind as a bat, before, but they are not really blind. They can see close up, so they're like nearsighted. And they can also see while they're flying around in the dark. So that's pretty good. They are, though, much better at getting around using their hearing, and the way that they do this is through echolocation. This is a term you may have heard before. Basically what it means is that they're relying on echoes to basically sense or hear the world around them. The really amazing thing that these guys do is they emit a tiny little noise from their mouths. It's sonar, essentially. They send out this little pip. It's really high pitched. It's usually way too high pitched for us adult humans to hear, although some children under the age of like 3 or 4 have been able to hear those sounds, which is really cool. So they send out these little pips. Those sound waves go around into the world around them and bounce off of objects, and then the echoes of that sound come back to these large satellite dish ears. They're picked up by the ears, and that's how they figure out what's around them. So that's how they figure out there's a tree there, there's a bug there, I'm gonna fly in this direction, or one of my friends is over there, this is where my home is. So they can really see the world around them using their hearing. It's kind of like Daredevil, if anybody's ever seen that movie. So that is one of the amazing things that they're able to do. A lot of people think that they're kind of just seeing the general space around them, but they're actually able to determine a few things with their echolocation. They can tell the textures of surfaces. So if they're flying towards a tree, they can assess the texture of the bark of that tree with their ears. They can figure out how fast an insect is moving and in which direction it's moving, so that they can go and fly and catch it. So they have amazing abilities with their hearing. And they're really using them in a way that's similar to the way that we would use our eyes. So it's very cool. Then they use their eyesight to kind of go in for that last pounce when they get up close to an animal that they want to eat. These guys are insectivores, so they really are primarily eating insect species. Not all bats are insectivores. There are a lot of fruit bats in the world. We've heard a lot about bats recently. All of our bats here in North America are fruit eaters. They're mostly relatively small like this, are insect eaters, and they're very tiny like this. And there are also some species of vampire bats in the world. They all live in South America, and mostly will be eating the blood of livestock, and they don't really suck blood.
Nicole and Abby have joined us. Carolyn is on with Molly.
Good morning, everybody. Hi, Carolyn and Molly. So these are some of our bat ambassadors that we're going to be meeting today. We do have 2, and then we have 2 that are in training that hopefully we'll be able to bring to you guys soon. Our big brown bat ambassadors are all female. When we do keep big brown bat ambassadors, they would normally live in a big colony full of lots and lots of other bats, so we do try to keep them with a friend. Betty and Brownie have been living together for a long time. Betty here joined Brownie about 4 or 5 years ago, so they really do love each other. When you find them in their enclosures in here, they are usually right next to each other, snuggling one on top of the other. Her eyes just popped open. She's so cute.
Yeah.
What?
Jeff was wondering if they ever get confused when they're flying around with all the different pips and sounds that they're making.
Well, what's really interesting is that bats have actually been shown to be able to understand and differentiate between each other's sonar sounds. So they've been able to record these guys, and it's almost like they talk to each other and differentiate. Oh, you're so cute. Differentiate one bat's sound from another bat's sound. What's interesting is that when there are baby little bats in a nursery, they are usually all together in this big nursery. There are a bunch of bald baby bats hanging upside down on the roof of a cave. They all look practically identical. It would be impossible for us to tell the difference. But bat moms can go into the nursery and identify their baby and which one is theirs and which one's they're supposed to be nursing. Are you talking? I just heard Brownie from inside the enclosure say, Betty, where are you? So we'll put Betty back. Nice job. You can kind of see her move around. Good girl. So they do really love to be next to each other. The interesting thing, though, about the bat nurseries is that the mom can identify her baby based on, you might be able to hear a little bit in here. They might be talking. No, they stopped doing it. But mom can identify her baby based on sound and based on its smell. So there's Brownie, or Betty looking for Brownie. I think Brownie went over this way. We're all looking for Brownie. There she, no? Where's Brownie? Sometimes Brownie likes to get herself tucked in really, really good into these fleeces, and it's very hard to locate her, but I think I found her right there. Hello! Hi! Hi! Yeah, so they are able to differentiate sonar noises between individuals, which is just amazing. They have almost like names for each other. Okay, this is Brownie. I know. Brownie is our older big brown bat. She has been with us for about 10 years now. And she came to us, you can see her mouth is moving. That's that echolocation that she's doing. She's actually emitting tiny, tiny little noises that are supersonic. We cannot hear them. And it's telling her what's around her. So it's telling her, why is there a phone in my face? She doesn't mind. So that's what is happening when she looks like she's chattering. She's actually making little sonar noises. Good girl, Brownie. She came to us after she was found trying to roost in somebody's chimney. This happens fairly frequently. They'll get into people's attics, chimneys, garages, where have you, under the siding and on houses. And unfortunately, the person whose home it was, they went to have a fire. They opened their flue and she fell down into the fireplace. The fire wasn't lit yet, but she did break her wing in that fall. So she is not able to go back out into the wild because of a wing injury as well. So neither of these bats are flighted, which is important to know, because you're so antsy this morning. Because that really impacts their ability to survive in the wild. These guys have to be able to get around, to fly. They really need to be able to hunt. These guys eat a lot of insects, a lot of mosquitoes, flying beetles, moths, things like that. And those are all flighted, so they need to be able to fly in order to hunt. They also will drink out of water as they're flying. So you might see these guys have a water dish in here. And that is so that they can drink. And in the wild, these guys would actually fly down over a pond or a stream and sip water on the wing. And what's really interesting is that all these bats in the colony will use the same water source, and they'll go in an order in one direction, one bat after another. And if one of the young bats, who doesn't know any better yet, tries to come from the other direction or go out of order, all the older bats will kind of reprimand him. They'll smack him and say, no, you have to go this way, like little bat air traffic controllers. So they're very strict when it comes to their social rules. Good girl, Brownie. Good job.
We have a question from Molly.
Hi, Molly.
She is wondering if bats can walk and not just fly to get around.
Yeah, so you probably saw when Betty went back in here, and you'll see when Brownie does go back in, they can get around using their thumbs. So on their wings, they have their long fingers that are pointed down towards the ground that make up their wing, and those are covered in that thin layer of skin that looks very, very delicate and fragile. And then they have a thumb. It's kind of like a little hook. You can kind of see it on Miss Brownie here. This thumb has a nail on it, and they're very, very good at using that to help them climb around. They also have little nails on their back feet. You can see her little back feet. There you go.
There we go.
So they have long, long nails on their feet that they can use to get around, and that helps them to climb. So they'll usually climb up like this and then flip over.
Carrie is wondering what the life expectancy is of a bat.
That's actually a really good question. So bats in general have the longest lifespan for any mammal of their size. So if you think about an animal this size, usually like a mouse or something, they might live, what, like 1 to 2 years? That is not nearly as long as a bat can live. Bats have been found in the wild, big brown bats have been found up to 20 years old, and in captivity they can live even longer. So there have been reports of like 30-year-old bats in captivity, which is really, really long for a mammal of this size. And then other species of bats in the world that are larger can live even longer. So it's really impressive how long they're able to live. And scientists don't really quite understand why that is, why their metabolism allows them to live that long. It could have something to do with the state of hibernation that they go into. It could have to do just with their ability to heal their cells and regenerate their cells. It's really, really interesting. There was an interesting article that came out about it recently about their abilities to repair their damaged DNA in a way that allows them to live a really long time. So it's very, very interesting. You can see she's chattering for Betty. She says, "Wait, where's Betty? I want to go back to bed." Nice job, Betty. You might be able to hear them a little bit. So they do make sounds that are audible to us as like communications with the other bats. You'll often hear that. But we're doing a little quiet, subtle pip right now. Hi! You're so cute. I'll get Betty back out and show you guys her again, because I did want to mention something really cool that happened when we got Betty as a patient. Oh, I just heard a little squeak. Sometimes we'll hear them get into little disputes and go beep, 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 at each other. And we'll have to be like, "Stop fighting, ladies." But usually it's like a, "Your feet are really cold. Stop stealing the covers," kind of fighting.
I have a couple questions that just
wonderful.
came in. Manya was wondering how far away they can hear each other when they're making sounds.
That's a really good question. So the echolocation frequencies that they're using are very, very high, which means that they don't travel as far as a low frequency sound. So it's really for sensing the immediate area. So I'm not exactly sure about like feet distance, but it is generally for sensing the immediate area. Lower frequency sounds that have a lower wavelength, can travel really, really far, and higher frequency sounds that have a really short wavelength, the ones that these guys use, usually get interrupted or hit things, and that's why they're really good for echolocation, because they bounce off of things really well.
Kathy is wondering how white nose syndrome has affected Maine bats.
That's a great question. So our Maine bats have had a really, really tough last decade or so. They were introduced to a fungal infection called white nose syndrome. It entered the United States in 2006. And what's interesting is a lot of folks didn't know what it was, didn't know, "What are you doing?" Didn't know it was being spread until much, much later. Our bat scientists were actually really, really confused. They're making little noises in there again. As to what was happening. Bats were just dying, and they had no real idea why. Where are you going? And what they suspect is that our bats were struggling with this fungal infection that would get on the face and nose of the bats. It would get under the skin, and it really, oh, there they are. Hi. They're like, "Turn off the lights." Oh my God, let us go to sleep.
Sarah is now watching with us. Hi,
Hello.
Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. That's my sister.
And I want to say thank you to the people that have donated to us.
Thank you so much.
This morning.
There is a donation button down below. Thank you all so much. We all of the proceeds go directly to support the care of our ambassadors. We really appreciate it. And our patients. And normally right now we would be presenting lots and lots of programs to school kids and senior centers and libraries, and all of the funds from those programs would go to support our work as well. So this is a really, really great way to kind of supplement that. So the really amazing story about Betty that I wanted to tell is that when Betty came into us, she was a pretty fat bat. And this is something that you don't really get to see very much in wild animals. Usually when they come in, they're on the, you know, healthy side of skinny or skinny side of healthy. They're getting by, but they might not have a bunch of extra fat stores on them. And the really cool thing about Betty was when she came in, she was super, super fat, and she was eating just a ton. Here, I'll try to get her down again. Come on, Betty. She was eating a bunch. We really couldn't keep her well fed enough. You can see how good their little claws are at grabbing things. So she was eating a lot. We couldn't really feed her as much as she wanted. She was eating just a ton of mealworms every day. And she, all of a sudden, one day, dropped about half of her body weight all at once. And we were really confused. We looked in her little bat box that she had been living in. Our bat patients live in wooden boxes that have fleeces like this in there. And when we looked through all the fleeces, we found 2 little bat pups in there that she had actually been pregnant with and then given birth to. And what was really, really cool about that is we were able to get one of those bat pups back out into the wild, and we knew where Betty came from. So we were able to reintroduce that bat to its colony, which is amazing. So it could go back with its grandparents and aunts and uncles and all that stuff. One of them did pass away, but one of them did survive and kind of replaced Betty out there in the wild, which is really cool. Our bats on the East Coast do tend to have twins like that. And then on the West Coast, we've actually seen them not do that. They usually only have one baby. It's interesting how they're kind of more genetically predisposed for twins on the East Coast. But that might help our bats on this East Coast better recover from all of the issues that white nose syndrome has posed. The good news on white nose is that we've kind of hit the bottom of that. It's kind of it's killed a lot of bats, but it might be as many as it would have killed. It's still very important to provide these guys with adequate habitat and make sure that we're being very careful about not spreading it. But it seems to have affected about 95% of the bats in our area. So it's hard to imagine that it could do more damage.
Enzo was wondering where in the country bats live.
Bats live all throughout the country. Different species of bats will live in a lot of different areas. In Maine, we have 9 different species of bats that call Maine home for at least part of the year. There are species of bats that live here all year round, and in the winter they are hibernating. So big brown bats are a great example of that. We call them house bats. And then there are also migratory bats. So there are bats that only really come up here when it's warm, and then they'll travel down south for the winter. They're making lots of cute noises in there. I'm sorry you guys can't hear it, but it's cute. There are bats that live all throughout the United States. There are lots of bats down in Texas and Florida. In the more tropical areas, you do see more bat species. And we are always discovering new species of bats. This is the really cool thing, is because they're nocturnal, because they're flighted and it's hard to see them and identify them, we have really only gotten the use of the technology used to identify them in the last decade or so. So we keep discovering new species of bats in the tropics in South America. So it's an evolving field, and the use of sonar technology has actually been a big part of how we identify bats now. We can pick up on their echolocation sounds and kind of hack their communication system to figure out who's talking, which is cool.
Kristen has joined us. Hi,
Hello.
Kristen. And Jeff had a question about bats migrating. Which species?
That's a great
really
question.
do?
So the species that live in Maine that migrate, we have the red bat, which is a bat that usually when you see it will be alone in a tree. It might look like a dead leaf hanging on to a clump of leaves. They're really, really good at just hanging on to a branch with one foot and swaying in the wind with the leaves. So they travel down south. Usually our tree bats are the ones that will travel. So hoary bats will also travel. The Indiana bat rarely comes to Maine, but it might start coming up here more often as it gets warmer. So they would normally migrate down south. And then there are a bunch of other tricolored myotis, all those sorts of bats. So there are about 5 species that live in Maine that would migrate down south. Yep.
I think we've caught up on all the questions for the time being.
Please let us know if you have any questions. Bats are fascinating, and we have an entire program that's an hour long that's just dedicated to bats. So we can talk about bats forever, and we love to do so. So please let us know in the comments if you have any questions. They're also fairly misunderstood. So there are a lot of myths and misconceptions about bats out there, like that they suck blood, like that they will get caught in your hair or try to nest in your hair, that they all have rabies. There are a lot of misconceptions of bats out there, and unfortunately now there might be even more. So we really love our bats and want to support our local bats. So we do a lot of programming to help to make sure people understand some of the myths about bats that are out there.
What are some of the benefits of having bats around?
There are a lot. So the USDA actually did an estimation that bats provide about $2 billion worth of pest control every year for us while we are sleeping for free. And that means that they are eating and killing insects that might do damage to our crops, that might spread illnesses, that might do damage to our plants, to us, to our pets. So there are a lot of benefits to insectivores in general, but especially bats, and primarily in the form of pest control. So they provide a lot of value to us. They are also pollinators. There are pollinator bats in many parts of the world. So they help to add value to our agricultural system by pollinating our crops, by pollinating flowers, things like that. So there's a ton of value in having bats, and for us, most notably, it helps us to, contain the spread of disease. If we have bats eating West Nile virus ridden mosquitoes, Triple E, Zika, things like that, those are all spread by mosquitoes, malaria. So insectivores that eat those animals but don't then spread the illness on themselves are very, very valuable.
Donna is wondering, where in nature in Maine would a colony hibernate? Like a cave, a hollow tree?
That's a really great example. So hibernating bats will usually form colonies during the summer. Usually there's a male colony, the bachelor colony they call it, and then the maternity colony, that's the females and all their babies. And those would usually be found in caves, rock crevices, things like that. Tree bats will usually live up under the bark of tree or in the canopy of trees, and those bats tend to form less large groups, so smaller groups. So our colony bats, our house bats, the ones that do hibernate, will form big, big colonies of bats that usually are found in caves. And then a lot of them are found in human structures, so attics, barns, abandoned buildings, things like that. Mills are great. So a lot of bats do like those big kind of replacement caves. So the really amazing thing about Brownie and Betty is that they both are able to help us to teach about bats with their disabilities. So both of them have a disability that prevents them from going back out into the wild. Betty is our younger one, so she does travel more than Brownie. Brownie's actually retired now. She is actually living with a mast cell tumor. And this is something we see in dogs that doesn't really affect them too much, and in cats it can. So we're actually not really sure how it's going to behave in Brownie. We're monitoring it. It hasn't really grown a lot. But she is the first recorded bat with that type of tumor ever in the world. That's going to be in literature. So it's really, really amazing. And she's a trooper. She's living with it. It doesn't really seem to bother her too much. And it's been a couple years now that she's had it. So she is going to teach people for years and years and years about bats. It's so cool.
Marshall would like to know what they eat for insects, and if they would actually eat any fruit.
So not our bats. Our bats are not nectivores, nectarivores. Is that what we figured out? Nectarivores?
Yeah, for nectar, and then like frugivores. For fruit. Yep.
So they are not going to be eating fruit. These guys will eat insects. The interesting thing is that a lot of people think that, you know, bats eat mosquitoes, that's all they're eating, but they eat a lot of different flying insects. So if you think about how much mass is in a mosquito, it's not very much, and these guys really need to eat a lot of body mass, so a lot of insect mass. Especially if they're pregnant and lactating, they need to be eating about their body weight in insect material every day or every night. So that would be about 800 to 1,000 mosquitoes, and that's a lot, and they're not going to be chasing down 800 mosquitoes. It would take too much energy. So they will eat lots of larger flying insects like moths, flying beetles, things like that. So if you've ever been outside and seen moths fluttering around your porch light, that's a great example of the type of food that would be great for a bat, because it's super dense in calories. They only have to hunt one moth to get a bunch of calories, so that's something that they would eat. They also will, when they're kind of weaning their babies, they'll tuck food. Once they've killed an insect, they'll tuck it into this little bat backpack that they have. We call it a bat backpack, but it's really a flap of skin that is next to their tail, and I can actually show you guys on our bats what I'm talking about. So they have this little pouch that they can tuck under and hide food in, and then go give it to their baby to get them onto solid foods. You can see they're right next to each other. They found each other and they're snuggling, but that little bat backpack on the triangle base of their tail, come here, they're both very sleepy. This is so early for you. I know. So if you can see right here, their tail curls up underneath their body and creates this little pouch right here that they can tuck food into. So they have a tiny, tiny little tail. Those are the little vertebrae of the tail. And then that's covered in skin. And you got an itch? Okay. Thank you for showing us your bat backpack. You can go back now.
Kinsley is wondering why bats live in trees.
So that's a good question. Trees provide a lot of cover for bats, so the leaves would provide some nice shelter. The bark would provide shelter, so that would probably be why, because it provides a nice habitat for them. It shelters them from the elements, predators, things like that. And actually what a lot of people don't know is that bats really love dead trees. Dead tree snags are great for bats. We always recommend, especially this time of year when everyone is going out and doing tree work, not to cut down dead trees unless they're doing, like, they could do significant damage to property, but they really do rely on that sort of habitat. Dead trees are great because they attract insects to eat the dying tree, and then woodpeckers come along and eat the insects, and they create a big, beautiful little habitat in the form of a woodpecker hole for lots of animals, not just bats, but birds, songbirds, owls, squirrels, all sorts of animals will use dead tree snags, and they're very, very important habitat. You also will see people making bat houses for bats. These are great if you have bats in your house, in your attic, in your garage, and you're trying to get rid of them, exclude them, and you want to still provide them with some place to live. It's usually best if you can, like, replace that habitat with the bat house on the outside of the house. It's hard to attract bats to a new bat house that doesn't have bats around it, doesn't have bats living near it. It's possible, but it's hard. It might take a couple of years for them to figure that out. But it's a really good idea to provide supplemental habitat for bats if you are either trying to get them out of your house or if you're cutting down a tree that they might have been living in. And we always say try to refrain from doing tree cutting this time of year, especially probably through to like October by now, because babies and bats and all sorts of animals are nesting in those trees.
I think we've all caught up on questions so far.
Okay, so we can wrap up with our bats. They seem to want to go back to bed. And then next, I just wanted to give you guys a little sneak peek of something we're going to be doing next week. So we will be continuing these morning meetings through the month of April. So definitely keep tuning in. Tomorrow we will have another one at 10. And we will also be wrapping up the sale of these t-shirts tomorrow. So or today is the last day that we'll be doing the fire sale on these t-shirts for $15. So definitely go to our website if you wanted to purchase these and didn't get a chance to. But next week, we will be doing something. I know a lot of you were probably really looking forward to coming to Make Way for Ducklings, our spring baby event, our spring wildlife event. We use that every year to help teach people about how to best care for our wild ecosystem in the springtime, how to take care or get any babies to us that need to be brought in, how to try to prevent a lot of those cases from happening. So usually we would have this big event at Wentworth Greenhouses. It would have been tomorrow, and we would sell raffle baskets at this event. And we had all these raffle baskets ready to go, and we wanted to still get those out to you guys, especially now when you might be a little hungry for things to do. So what we did was we created an online auction for you guys. We created 5 baskets for you guys to bid on, and we will be launching this tomorrow. So these are a couple of them. We have our pollinator basket here on the left, and then our mammal themed basket here on the right. All of these baskets have lots and lots of activities in them, especially for kids. We also have an adult, we're calling it our night owls basket, specifically for folks, for adults. But most of these baskets are aimed at families who need to keep their kids busy and keep themselves busy. We have lots of outdoor activities, nature art kits, anything that would help a family get outside, get in nature, lots of books, and then lots of trinkets and things that can help you just enrich your spirit. So we hope that you guys will keep an eye out for this tomorrow. It'll be going live tomorrow morning. We're really excited about it. These have been generously donated by many of our local businesses and friends of the Center for Wildlife. So Churchill's Gardens in Exeter, for example, donated these mugs with the birds on them, and there's matching napkins. And we have very generous supporters who will go out shopping for these baskets. So we love cultivating these, curating these with themes, and we hope that you guys enjoy them. So please do keep your eyes out for this tomorrow. And then if you have any questions about any of the items or anything, just shoot us a note and we can answer them. But thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you for donating. Thank you for staying connected with the Center for Wildlife, and we hope you stay happy, healthy, and safe. And we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, guys.